Hey everybody, Tony UV, CEO at VerSprite, coming to you live from the ATL. I wanted to share some thoughts on the recent Uber breach. And this isn't a Uber shaming. In fact, a big shout out to the blue team and all the incident responders that are going to be helping inside and out of the organization. There's a lot of people, globally that are affected by this breach. So we all want to be able to make sure that they get in a better state very soon from this incident. That being said, there's always, from any incident that happens to any organization, many opportunities for lessons learned. So let's see what lessons learned do we have thus far from what we know. Number one, let's talk about awareness training for a second. Now, awareness training within the InfoSec community has long been a hot topic because many have said, is this even worth it? I mean, are we really getting a lot of return on investment from the awareness training that we do, whether we're using a learning management system, whether we're using some sort of war gaming or red teaming exercise? What are some of the things that are working? What are some of the things that are not working? Well, that could be a full 1 hour, if not more, podcast. But one important ingredient to consider is definitely context. Context is king at any type of engagement. If you're using a lot of canned threat campaigns against your employees in order to prepare them for the real world, they're probably not going to get prepared. In fact, one key recommendation that we've used for a long time is making any type of an adversarial simulation to be very modular. How attackers approach an organization is going to be very different by department. They might have unique threat campaigns against HR as compared to DevOps, or marketing versus HR. So it's really important to be able to think about what type of exercise you're putting your employees through and if you're actually preparing them for real world attacks. So context is really important. Number two takeaway that I've noticed that I think is really important to share is on exploitation versus post-exploitation. So with this particular, the details that we know thus far is there was a young individual that interfaced and perpetrated a IT individual within the Uber organization, and they targeted someone, and though they were able to convince them to be able to provide some level of credentials into the environment. Now, from there, that's where the real damage was done. So you have human exploitation on the front end, and then what happens afterwards is really where all the damage happens. Now, let's funnel all of this key point into an engagement model. What are you doing as an organization within your adversarial engagements, your red teaming, your purple teaming, to be able to factor in post-exploitation attempts? And are you factoring enough of the human element, right? So again, context is king. If you're not leading with a good contextual-based adversarial exercise, you unfortunately are not preparing your organization adequately enough, because attackers and threat actors are doing their homework on every single individual in terms of their private life and their public life, where they work, how they work, etc. What vendors, supply chain dependencies a company has, etc. So it's important to also look at the engagement model. So if your engagement model is just happy with initial exploitation, and you're not really allowing the engagement to go into post-exploitation examples, then you're not really going to be able to have such a very rich exercise where it shows the magnitude of how initial exploitation can lead to a lot of bad situations. Now, in working with a lot of multinational companies, many companies will say, well, you know what? We just want to be able to put the gloves on some of these engagement models because we don't want a disruption. We don't want a lot of things to take time away from resources that might need to stop or respond and do things like that. There's definitely a fine balance between ensuring continuity of doing an adversarial engagement where you're not disrupting the business. But there's nothing more disruptive, as will be seen by this breach and the breaches that have happened, and unfortunately the breaches that are to come, than an actual breach, right? You're gonna have PR, legal, external counsel, IT, third-party vendors, auditors. There's a lot of things that are gonna be extremely disruptive. So if you're not factoring in the right engagement model, where you basically have, maybe not as many gloves on your cybersecurity partner, your return on investment is probably not going to be too high. So the last thing I'll say around that is there are many very large entities that want to make sure that there is a passing grade, and that they want to make sure that their results from a purple team or a red team engagement, or what we like to call an organizational threat model, comes out squeaky clean for the purposes of an audit, maybe for the purposes of investments, rounds of funding. There's a lot of different reasons why some of these activities are financed and actually on budget, right? But the real reason at the end of the day is to practice and make sure that you're going through a real simulated adversarial exercise that is going to exercise your employees, your processes, your technology, and make sure you're ready, because any given day there could be an adversarial event that really becomes very disruptive. Anyway, this is Tony UV. Hopefully these were helpful. I'm signing out from the ATL. Take care.